players. Both look ready, want to make a name for themselves here on the SCG Tour, and of course lock up that invite to the Players' Championship that all these players so hungry for. Dylon showing respect to both pho and sriracha, two of my favorite foods. Props there. Nice little one drop here from Chris. It's Night Market Lookout. That's about as aggressive as it gets and can still do a little bit of damage through an Arboreal Grazer. Meanwhile, Thornwood Falls over on Dylon's side, already about gaining that life, padding the life total a little bit. I think Chris was on a mulligan to 6 here. You see a nice little aggressive draw though, coming together. A Smuggler's Copter, Scrap Heap Scrounger, Night Market Lookout doing its thing early.
Yeah, I like Chris's opener a lot. It looks like it's got that pressure that we wanted him to have.
And with the Smuggler's Copter, that combines very well with the Night Market Lookout, Greg.
Yeah, and the Copter is great with some of the other cards in his hand where he can discard them early and then still get value out of them as the game progresses.
But it's time to start ramping. Here is Arboreal Grazer, going to put it in a Sun Petal Grove. Plains comes down afterwards. Creeping closer to that Hour of Promise, which, as we said, will authoritatively lock up the ground. But this is going to be a nice little turn for Chris as well. Going to be able to deploy 2 threats here. Even get a counter on that Knight of the Ebon Legion, should he so choose. Thinking through his plays, you assume he wants to discard the Bloodsoaked Champion to the Smuggler's Copter?
Yes. I like the play of, playing your 1-drop that's going to get a counter, playing your 2-drop because it has so much power, discarding the card that's easiest to bring back from the grid.
Okay, and just get it later on. Seems fine. Here's Scrap Heap Scrounger from Chris. That's going to go ahead, crew up that Copter. Copter and Night Market Lookout going to attack. That's going to represent 4 points of damage. 1 coming from when the Night Market Lookout taps. Chris takes the draw from Smuggler's Copter. Okay. Going to hold on to that Bloodsoaked Champion. That makes sense. Doesn't really need that 4th land here.
Yeah, and I like that he chose to attack, look at the extra card with the Smuggler's Copter before deciding which 1-drop he wanted to get onto the board.
Yeah, Arboreal Grazer is going to take the opportunity to block the Smuggler's Copter too. Just going to go ahead and cash that one in now. What do you think of that, Craig?
Yeah, I mean, that just screams of having a supreme verdict on the other side.
It does. Chris, in contemplation of that, plays the Bloodsoaked Champion. Makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's funny because, initially at the start of the turn, we're like, all right, play the 1-2,
right,
play your 2-drop, attack for a bunch of damage, get your counter. But then a little more information, you say, all right, I want to discard the land. I want to play the creature that I can regrow because the chances of the Wrath are so high.
Yeah.
And Chris just taking a good line there. But on the flip side, Dylan is still at 1 million life considering the way this game's progressed.
Oh, very high life total. That is for sure. Yeah, Chris did a great job of gathering as much information as possible before making any decisions. And I believe played that turn perfectly.
He really did, but the way the game is shaping up, I like it a lot on Dylon's side.
Sure. Here's a Knight of the Ebon Legion. It's going to go ahead, crew Copter. Copter attacks for 3. Dylon going to fall to 14. The loot from the Copter going to discard Scrap Heap Scrounger. A lot of recursive threats here. Plays a Mutavault. A lot of Wrath-proof threats coming from Chris. We talked about how resilient this deck can be, how aggressive it can be at times, how well it can play the control role. You're seeing that resiliency really show up in this game. Very important to note, 2 planes on Dylon's side. That matters a lot when you go to Hour of Promise.
Yeah, he won't be getting the zombies this turn.
Mm-hmm. Gonna have to wait a little bit longer if Hour of Promise is gonna put 2 zombies onto the battlefield. Let's see what the play is here.
He had some interesting lines It looks like a Field of Ruin in the hand that can take care of the Mutavault.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he doesn't have one of his big X spells, he might be thinking that he doesn't want to Hour of Promise this turn.
Disagree, Craig. He's going to fire off the Hour of Promise, and we're going to get 2 lands from the library. Certainly a field is coming. Don't think you can get 2 fields here unless you have a backup Hour. Just pulled one to the front. Blast Zone.
Yeah, that's a fine one.
Yeah. There's field. There's Blast Zone. As we mentioned, no zombies here because of double planes. You read Dylon's face.
Yeah,
he says, nope, no zombies.
Double check, triple check.
Yeah.
And if I'm Chris, I'm jamming as much damage as possible.
Oh, absolutely.
This turn,
absolutely.
which might seem like a pretty straightforward thing to say, but there's times where you're like, all right, I won't deal that extra damage so I can draw an additional card off my castle or something like that. But we're in a situation where the zombies are going to start rolling in, and we got to get the damage in on the ground while it's good to go.
Yeah, got to push. Got to hope Smuggler's Copter can finish the job in the air. A land would have allowed Mutavault activation as well as Night Pump.
Yeah, that would have been a lot of damage.
It would have. Probably put the Mutavault in the Copter at that point. Okay, another Night. It's nice too. Crew up that Copter. And we're going to pump on Knight of the Ebon Legion. Makes sense. Maximize your damage. Smuggler's Loot. Discards another Copter.
So this is a ton of damage, and these small creatures are actually out of range of just trading with zombies, which I like.
Yeah, very important. Dylon down to just 4 life here. Takes a draw. I believe that's an Azorius Charm? One of in the deck.
Yep.
Keep in mind too, Craig, players know deck lists at this point. There is a Settle the Wreckage in Dylon's deck. You know Chris is going to be thinking about that one.
Yeah, and with no Night Market Lookout on the other side of the board, it's just all about attacking.
How surprisingly good is Night Market Lookout in this deck?
I'd say it's good, not great.
But look, you see that card and you're like, this has to be a mistake. There must be a better one drop than this. And then you think a little bit more and it reveals itself to you.
It is a card that I've cut from every draft deck ever.
Sure. And I don't blame you. Here's a Tranquil Cove that's going to gain a life, put 1 zombie onto the battlefield. What kind of follow-up do we have here? Time to cash in that Blast Zone.
And
I'm not sure I love closing down that Field of Ruin.
Yeah, I would have liked to leave the Field of Ruin up. I think just the threat of that alone is going to keep the opponent from activating their Mutavault.
Seems better than having planes open. Because you certainly want to be able to cast that Azorius Charm if you have to. I will say I can't quite make out the last card in Dylon's hand, though.
Well, and losing the Blast Zone in there meant that a Field of Ruin activation later will not result in a zombie.
Very true. Here's Scrap Heap Scrounger. Mutavault activation. Scrap Heap hops in the Copter. Everyone going to go ahead and attack. Draw and discard from Chris.
Oh, and if you're on Chris's side, you're saying, I'm so close.
Ooh, look at this. So Dylon's already reaching to make a play. And Chris hasn't decided exactly what he's going to discard yet. And one of his potential options was a redundant Smuggler's Copter.
Interesting.
I don't know what he ended up pitching. It looks like he pitched Murderous Rider and held on to the Copter. And I wonder if maybe Dylon tipped his hand just a little bit. There you see Azorius Charm on the Smuggler's Copter. That's going to go on top anyway, but still.
No, I agree with you. I think that's super relevant. Chris is going to be able to play out the next couple of turns where if he's cagey about it, he gets to crew 1 Copter and attack, and the other Copter's already there for the next turn without Summoning Sickness ready to go.
Exactly. Yeah, I think a double copter setup is exactly what you want here. Oh, big draw there from Dylon. It's Hour of Promise. It's going to be good for a mess of zombies.
Yeah, it's crazy how quick this deck goes from defense to offense with the zombie army.
Yep.
And I kind of want to see him get a Field of the Dead and another land that gains 1 life. Because that 1 life represents an entire extra turn against those smuggler copters.
Yeah, that's a great point, Craig. Do we have another gain life land left?
There was a smattering of them throughout the deck, so I'm not 100%. But I think we're about to find out. Ooh.
This is an interesting one. Scavenging Grounds plus Field of the Dead. Didn't quite hit that zombie bonus. Can occasionally do that with this deck. It's rare, admittedly.
The double desert zombie bonus.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. But we are going to get these zombies from Field of the Dead. 4 zombies. And that's it. The ground's locked up.
Yep.
You got to go to the air now if you're Chris. But we know Chris with a Smuggler's Copter in hand and a Smuggler's Copter on the top of the library as well. Here's Temple of Enlightenment. That's going to make 2 more zombies. Chris, though, doesn't have much time at this point. That's the other thing that's going on here.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I was saying, the defense to offense happens so fast.
Here's Smuggler's Copter number 1. Here's Smuggler's Copter number 2.
Yep.
Pass the turn back.
And a lot of draws from Dylon's side just close out this game instantly. Any of the X spells gaining life would just be massive here.
Yep.
Sphinx's Resolution just would close out the game instantly.
Yeah, right now Chris is representing 6 in the air via 2 crude Smuggler's Copter. Of course, Mutavault at the ready to hop into one of those copters. Does Dylon have an answer in hand? Pulling some lands around. We're looking at a cycle on an irrigated farmland. Yep. Time to cycle. Takes his draw. Land.
Glacial Fortress, I believe.
And what is that last card in hand, Craig? Can you make it out?
Not 100%. It might be a promo Elvish Rejuvenator.
Okay. It does look like a green card to me. That really can't yield any answers, though.
Sure. Again, if he has another land that can gain him a life, he can take a line where he gains a life going up to 4.
Mm-hmm.
He uses Field of Ruin to blow up the Mutavault, and then he uses his Desert to take out the opposing graveyard, and potentially Chris can't crew up both copters on his turn.
Okay, but he needs to have +1 life in order to get there.
Yes.
And it looks like that's what we're setting up. It is an Elvish Rejuvenator. We're going to take a look at the top 5. Forest, Arboreal Grazer, Oko, Supreme Verdict. Forest is not going to get it done here, Craig.
And it's this close. I mean, look how many zombies he has on the board. He just needs 1 or 2 more turns.
Not bad at reading lips. I think Dylon just went, wow. Unable to find that answer. Was so close.
So
Craig.
close.
So close. But Chris Barone takes game 1, and being on the play really matters.
That's right
there.
where I was going. I think if Dylon's on the play of that game, he's ahead the whole time. He doesn't take a big hit on the ground at any point. He's got zombies that can start attacking sooner, and he'd be able to win that game.
is going to be on the play for the second of our pre-board games. Of course, we'll sideboard for games 3, 4, and 5, so we're staying with the main deck configuration at this point. Craig, our tournament's on its last day. It's always bittersweet when we have to say goodbye and take a time out from our event, but the hardest part is going back to sitting in normal chairs. I know you walk around your office come Monday just throwing chairs around. What is this schwill? How am I supposed to sit in this?
So, yeah, after these events are wrapping up, I'm always trying to roll one of these bad boys out of the event hall with me.
They've caught you every time.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, I put a sheet over it. I'm like, oh, it's just a ghost. What's the big deal?
Yeah, ghosts are always at SCGCon.
Yeah, and they always leave with me.
Sure.
No, that never works out.
Unfortunately, I also have not successfully wrangled one of these Carnox gaming chairs, but I will, and I may as well save 10% at checkout when I visit carnox.com/SCG. Adam Franzi, talked to him after his quarterfinals win. Lots of good things to say about those Carnox gaming chairs. He had a specific one in the feature match area.
He has
particularly
one
liked.
Dialed up. He said, can I sit in this particular chair?
Right. You see that one with the headrest behind Chris Barone? That's the one that Adam really wants to be back in when we go to the semifinals.
And he's going to get it.
I think so. He staked out his claim early. We all have a favorite Carnox gaming chairs. I like the ones that sit really high, personally.
Yes, you do. You like to slide the ones that a little bit lower over this way.
Yep, those are for you.
Why is that, Brian?
It's just totally random. Not a great opener from Dylon there.
Yeah, it looked like he was short on green mana in that hand.
Yeah, no green. Gonna go ahead and ship it back. Some results from the backup match. One game apiece. Headed into game 3, both Sam and Kevin winning a game pre-sideboard. Once we go to sideboard, who do you think things get better for in that matchup?
It's tough. So they each get more removal, and then it's a question of, do you like kind of the more raw power out of the Gruul deck, or the synergies that need multiple cards to work out of the black-green counters deck?
I think it's going to be very, very close matchup. I had a really hard time picking a winner there.
Oh, that's an absolute slugfest, that matchup.
Definitely is. Really like the look of Dylon's deck, how he's built here. Most of these decks just maxing Teferi Time Raveler, playing somewhere between 3 and 4 copies. Dylon going with Oko instead.
Yep.
And I think that's going to benefit him in this matchup.
Yeah, a couple of food lying around would have been pretty nice that game.
Absolutely. You see how close these games can often be. But being on the play going to be a huge advantage here. It looks like both players on a mulligan to 6. There's that night market lookout Smuggler's Copter start for Chris again. I think there's a Thoughtseize rolled up there too. I like that setup.
Yeah, both these players look like they have pretty good hands.
Green-White Temple going to be the start over on Huckabone's side. Night market lookout to play from Chris. Found a Thornwood Falls, going to gain a life. So it's worth noting, in that last game, Dylon did have another life gain land available, but that Scavenging Ground was going to be important as well. Had to control the graveyard. So you can see the tension in the decision there. Arboreal Grazer coming down. Half blocks Night Market Lookout. Still going to lose a life as Chris gains a life. Follow-up play, Smuggler's Copter.
Love it.
Yep. Nice little start from Chris. Feels very different when you're on the draw, though, doesn't it, Craig?
It really does. We see the Hour of Promise in Dylon's hand here.
No 5th land yet. It's going to have a Growth Spiral to look for it, though.
Yeah, Growth Spiral and a Draw Step.
Yep.
He has this earlier Blast Zone, so he's going to be able to blow up that Copter if he wants to. You know, just a lot more things working out for him this game.
Has the Supreme Verdict in hand as well. We saw Supreme Verdict with some weaknesses in this matchup. A lot of resiliency on Chris's side. Here's a big play from Chris. It's time for Thoughtseize. have to think sprinting towards that Hour of Promise.
Yes, 100%.
Dylon going to give him a chance to make a mistake. Hope maybe he takes a Growth Spiral. Supreme Verdict. It's worth noting Chris does have a double Night Market Lookout hand. That is one of the few cards that is vulnerable to Supreme Verdict.
Yeah, the Verdict or the Blast Zone on one.
Chris going to do some due diligence here. Think through it. Ultimately going to settle on the Hour of Promise.
Yeah, definitely worth thinking about all the cards, but
100%.
But that Hour of Promise is just such a problem. You know, Dylon's already ramping ahead of you in this game. You can't race the zombies if he gets too far ahead.
Here's a Scrap Heap Scrounger. Gonna crew up Copter. Whole team's gonna swing. Bet we're cashing in this Arboreal Grazer again. Here's a loot. Finds a castle. A little bit more staying power. Definitely the best Smuggler's Copter deck in the format.
100%. Yeah, this is interesting where Dylan has this tension. He wants to up the Blast Zone, but he also wants to cast the Growth Spiral, and there's no guarantee he's going to hit another land.
Yep.
But doing the Growth Spiral first might help inform his decision.
Yeah, we are going to throw that Arboreal Grazer under the bus, under the Copter Blades, and choosing to tick up Blast Zone. Going to prioritize preserving the life total a little bit. Elvish Rejuvenator, the draw, so no 5th land. Not the end of the world.
No, I still think that's a pretty good draw for him.
Just blow up that Blast Zone now. Makes sense. Don't even give the chance to crew that Copter. Now the turn passes back to Chris. Draws Fatal Push. Again, we talked about not many chances to convert that card into a meaningful advantage.
Yeah, very awkward in this matchup.
Night Market Lookout gets in for 2. Here's a backup Night Market Lookout. Castle Lockdwayne comes down, and Chris going to pass the turn back, taking advantage of the fact that he knows Dylon without a land drop thus far. Draws Growth Spiral. Going to play Elvish Rejuvenator. Nice little trade available with one of the Night Market Lookouts.
Yeah, the mono black deck can't turn on the Fatal Push to kill bigger things very often.
Right. Finds a Field of the Dead as well as a Field of Ruin.
This is a pretty interesting line where he can set up his mana a little better, where he can double Growth Spiral at some point if he needs to. Or he can take the utility card in Field of the Dead and start working his way towards zombies.
Interesting. He's going to take the Field of the Dead, it looks like. And Dylon just going to go ahead and pass the turn back.
I think I like this line. So, with no Copter on the opposing side of the board, you just start need to get some zombies out.
Sure.
And you're going to lock up the ground. And you're probably pretty good from there.
Knight of the Ebon Legion was the draw for Chris. 2 life loss for Huckabone. Of course, going to take a trade here.
Turning on that Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Yeah, very true. Now, Chris does know about that Supreme Verdict. So what do? Do you run out the Knight of the Ebon Legion? Do you hold back? Just go ahead and make a Scrap Heap Scrounger at the end of your opponent's turn?
Yeah, so I think you force the opponent's hand. You run out your Knight here, and you say, I'm still representing the Scrap Heap Scrounger at the end of your turn. go ahead and Wrath right away. If you don't, I'm going to be attacking you for 7 next turn, put you on that 2-turn clock.
Yeah, Chris also knows about the growth spiral too. So choking Dylan's mana has a lot of appeal, but not going to play the Knight, just going to pass the turn back.
I like getting the pressure on the board there. I feel like if this game goes much longer, Dylan's not even going to need to Wrath. It's potential just to have zombies that'll invalidate a lot of these ground creatures.
That is true. Let's see what the draw is over on Huckabone's side.
And it looks like he just
passed. Yeah. Interesting. Scrap Heap Ground going to come back. Was it a second Supreme Verdict he drew? Here comes an attack for 4. Huckabone going to Growth Spiral. Takes his draw. Hour of Promise. Usually thrilled to see that one. Not when you don't have a 5th land.
Tough.
Untapped 5th land would be huge here, but there's not a whole lot of options that do it because there's no basic land types on the battlefield yet. So all those tap lands are going to come in tapped. You really need to hit one of your basics or one of your shock lands here on this turn.
Yeah, but if he finds that land, he can search for 2 deserts. He'll get 2 zombies off the lands that he searched for, 2 zombies off of the bonus from the hour, and then he's sitting pretty.
Now, the Hour of Promise triggers if you have just 2 deserts in play, or do you have to have 3? It's been a minute since I looked at that card. Why don't we take a look at Hour of Promise? I'd love to see that one up on our screen. Played a lot of that card in Standard. Didn't quite make the cut in Modern. We thought it might. Search your library for up to 2 lands, then if you control 3 or more deserts.
Yep.
So going to miss on that. And miss the 5th land anyway, so just going to cast Supreme Verdict. Scrap Heap Scrounger comes back from the yard.
And this is a disaster for Dylan.
Yeah, really unfortunate. 30 lands in the deck, stuck on 4. Here's a Thoughtseize. Oh, that's brutal. Great draw from Chris, and for the second time has the option of denying Huckabone Hour of Promise, the key card in the deck. Again, being thoughtful, thinking it through.
Yeah, and that Fatal Push might end up being relevant here. If Dylan thinks he's going to be able to get a chump block in to save himself an extra turn, not going to happen.
We said it was unlikely to be a high impact card, but we thought you might be able to find a spot for it. That's a pretty ideal spot. Here comes Scrap Heap Scrounger. Huckabone down to 5.
Oh, think about this one, Chris.
Blood-Soaked Champion.
I'm not sure I like this line. You're telling the opponent, Wrath of God me here, and I'm not going to have any pressure going into the next turn.
What do you have for an alternative play? I think it's that or nothing, right? I'd rather dictate to my opponent and force the choice he's going to have to make on this turn. Has to Wrath. I mean, you could try the Arboreal Grazer. You give your opponent the chance to mess up as well, right? If he just plays Arboreal Grazer, you got him. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
Here's Arboreal Grazer. Here's Fatal Push.
Yep, giving the opponent a chance to make a big mistake.
Yeah, gonna untap. But there's an Azorius Charm in hand for Huckabone. Had the backup. Scrap Heap Scrounger heads to the top of the library one more time. Is going to take 2. Smuggler's Copter.
Oh, man.
Big time draw. And Chris, this entire game has played with the Knight in hand. Has it at the ready to crew up that Smuggler's Copter on the next turn. Going to play it here. Well, okay, you know you've got the Scrap Heap Scrounger coming.
Exactly.
That's fine. Again, force your opponent. Force your opponent's hand. Make them play how you want them to.
And I think this is just too many diverse threats. man, the resiliency of cards coming back from the graveyard and the early pressure, the hand disruption, really all coming together for Chris in these first 2 games.
And that is going to get a scoop, and that means Chris Barone up 2-0 before we head to sideboards. And Chris is the one who's getting dead cards out of his deck when it comes to sideboarding time. Wild stuff, a huge advantage for Chris as we head into Game 3. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at these sideboards there for Chris. You see 4 Noxious Grasp, 3 Legion's End, 2 Collective Brutality, Kalidas Trader of Get, and a Duress. Craig, what are you going to do if you're sitting on Chris's side?
It's a little tough because you want to get all of these Fatal Pushes out of your deck, but potentially doesn't even have enough cards to bring in. So I like the 2 Collective Brutality, and I like the Duress, and these other cards are just kind of clunky. Like Legion's End is just going to be a worse version of Fatal Push to me. It costs more mana.
Hold on. You get all the zombies from Field of the Dead.
Oh, of course.
That's a big difference.
No,
maker,
you're right. So I'm sorry, I completely missed that. I would not want all 3 of the Legion's End.
Okay.
It's one of those cards where if you don't kill them, you know, you don't want multiple Legion's End in your hand early in the game.
Agreed.
You want to have a presence on the board. Every time you have a Legion's End in your hand, that's one less attacker that you're going to have on the board. So I can see bringing 1 or 2 copies of Legion's End. I think 3 is too many.
I'm going to make a counter argument. In most instances, I would agree with you. And in standard matchups, I would often play it in that fashion. Obviously, Vampires versus Field of the Dead decks was a big part of that standard format, and I tended to be a little bit more conservative with my Legion's End numbers. But we have Smuggler's Copter, and I kind of hate the argument like, oh, you could always just discard it. People use it with like bad cards and Force of Will a lot of the times. But it is true. If you're just Legion's End flooded, you just convert that into something else. And it's such a big swing in so many spots when you're relying on your zombies to lock up the ground. I don't know. You might be able to talk me into the full 3 copies here.
Okay.
We'll have to see how Chris chooses to play it. Meanwhile, over on Dylan's side, we were looking at 2 Tireless Tracker, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Glass Casket, 2 Teferi Time Raveler, 2 Dovin's Veto, a Knight of Autumn, a Lyra Dawnbringer, 1 Walking Ballista, 1 Return to Nature, and finally 1 Negate. Craig, what are you doing over on that side of things?
Give me everything.
It all sounds good, right?
Yeah, I mean, not everything, but I think if Dylan is able to slow down and play a more controlling game where he says, Rest in Peace locks up your graveyard, Tireless Tracker is going to give me the card advantage when I'm going more 1-for-1, bringing in cards like Glass Casket. Knight of Autumn is going to be this versatile card, which can blow up a copter if it needs to. It can gain me life. It can just be a big body on the board. Lyra Dawnbringer is
the biggest of bodies.
Yeah, just this massive haymaker in the air. You're no longer vulnerable to the copter. It can gain you piles of life. Like, I like all of those cards. A card like Return to Nature, like they're not going to have a copter every time, and do you want to be attacking other aspects out of their deck? I'm not sure if that card is versatile enough.
Well, you hit the graveyard too, which I think is important here.
Well, I feel like a lot of times they've got a lot of things in the graveyard, and getting one of them isn't a real big deal.
That's true.
But you just see how good a lot of these other options are. Something like Glass Casket that just exiles the creature so that they can't rebuy it from the graveyard. Very effective.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I talked about how I felt like Chris has a little bit more in post-sideboard games, and then we're listing all these amazing cards that Huckabone has access to. I see a lot of those cards as upgrades. You're still fundamentally doing the same thing. You're just replacing basically worse versions of those cards in your deck. On Chris's side, you're getting actual bad cards out of your deck.
Sure, yep.
And that's why I think Chris actually improves more than Huckabone does in these games 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, and part of the question is how many cards Dylan can actually take out of his deck.
Right.
We listed a whole mess of cards there, but if he starts sideboarding out 8, 9, 10 cards, does his deck still execute his game plan real consistently?
He only plays 30 non-land spells, right?
Yep.
There's not really that much to work with here. So it'll be interesting to see how Huckabone wants to play this one as we head into Game 3. Well, Craig, it's my favorite time of the broadcast. We get to talk about buying Magic cards for a little while.
You did make a land purchase today.
I did buy a land. It was not a basic one. It was a non-basic land.
Was it ever?
It was an FBB Taiga. I needed another Taiga for my lands deck, so went ahead and picked that one up. I already had the basics I needed, but if I didn't, you could be sure I'd be heading over to go.starcitygames.com/sale and finding my basics there. All kinds of basic lands available, including my favorite type of basic land presently, the unstable basic land. Love those big borderless lands. Players drawing openers here. A lot of lands, as is often the case. Oko, Return to Nature, the non-land cards in Dylan's hand.
Yeah, tons of lands. This is one of the stressful points when you play these 30 land decks.
You got to live off the top of your deck a little bit.
Well, you look at these openers, you're saying, I need all these lands to execute my game plan. But also, there's so many lands still in my deck, there's a high likelihood that I continue drawing a lot of lands throughout this game.
Sure, 25 left at that point. Assuming you didn't sideboard any out, which you often do, in
Yep.
fairness. So it could be a little bit lower than that. But both players disappointed with their 7. Going to go ahead and grab 6. Chris really showing off the skills that have made him dominant all weekend, only losing a single match. And that was not with this deck. That was with his modern deck, Humans.
Well, and he paced the field by so much.
It didn't matter when he lost.
Well, he was able to triple draw at the end
Right.
of the day, I believe, which is just an absurd position to be in.
Yeah. Seeing a little bit more action in this hand from Huckabone. Fewer lands. Think you can mostly live with that. See here, Boreal Grazer, Night of Autumn, Hour of Promise, Elvish Rejuvenator, and 2 lands. I don't think you're going to find a better 5 than that.
I like this hand, and I think it's easy to stick the Arboreal Grazer on the bottom.
Okay.
If you don't have a bunch of redundant lands in your deck, you're going to just make your land drops naturally and not have that card be high impact.
Dylan disagreed. He put Hour of Promise
All right, well,
on the bottom.
We'll see if he peels 2 or 3 lands in a row to make the Grazer really worth it here.
Definitely want to hit a land on this turn. This is a big draw step. Found it. Did we? What is that card?
I believe that's a Rest in Peace from the Gideon Spellbook.
Oh, that is a weird looking card, and it's not a land, which is problematic for sure.
Listen, I love it when people have all sorts of different artworks, different sets that they like.
Right, me too, but it makes our job pretty
I
hard.
cannot stand the Gideon Spellbook cards.
Sure.
To me, they just did nothing special to them.
I was pretty sure that was a land. It was very hard to spot as a Rest in Peace. Night Market Lookout, getting in that half attack one more time. Huckabone's gained 2 from his lands, but now Chris knows you are lacking a 3rd land, sir. How can I punish that? Does he want to go 1-drop, 1-drop? Does he want to play Smuggler's Copter? Has some options. It's like Mutavault into Smuggler's Copter, going to be the play. Passes the turn back, have to have a 3rd land here.
Oh,
It's another rest in peace. And you see the sigh from Huckabone. A shake of the head. And this one starting to get away from Dylan.
And this is not the way you'd expect these games to go, where the ramp deck playing 30 lands gets stuck on lands 2 games in a row.
Here's a Night Market Lookout. That's going to crew up that Smuggler's Copter. Loss of life for Huckabone. 4 power headed your way. 1 more loss of life. Night Market Lookout. Explosive little start from Mono Black Aggro. There you see Night Market Lookout. Not even a limited all-star. Barely made a dent in Standard. Shining in this Pioneer deck.
You're really putting a lot of polish on those Night Market Lookouts.
I think they've been very good in all these games. I am telling you, Craig.
Is this another tap land? What a tease.
It is. It's a temple. I saw this deck won the PTQ. First thing I did was a Scryfall search, seeing what 1-drops I could replace these cards with.
Sure.
I was right there with you, but the more I see it, the more I believe this is the correct 1-drop. There is that tapped green-white temple.
So painful.
I mean, it's basically like untapped blue source or bust here, and even that, you're still in a dangerous situation.
Well, I don't. He's going to take a bunch of damage this turn.
Mm-hmm.
Next turn, he can play the knight, blow up the copter, and trade with something.
Okay.
And then the turn after that, he needs to have the Wrath of God in the worst possible way. Multiple Mutavaults. This is just getting worse and worse every turn.
Yeah, pushing so much damage on this turn. 2 triggers from Night Market. Look out.
All right, my plan doesn't even work anymore.
Yeah, this is getting ugly fast. Gonna go ahead and loot from that copter. Finds a Thoughtseize.
Oh man.
I think we have used our land drop for the turn.
We have, but it still might strip the Wrath of God out of the opponent's hand before he can use it.
Yeah. It's like 9 damage. Headed the way of Huckabone. Gonna fall to just 7. Oh boy. We need something off the top of this deck. I guess you already have your blue source. Okay, so any untapped land lets you cast Supreme Verdict. Peels it. It's an Elvish Rejuvenator. That's not gonna do.
And I think that's it.
Knight of Autumn, kill Copter.
Then 2 Mutavaults get fired up. Everything crashes into the red zone. Oh, this is a rough way to go out.
Yeah, he's going to show his hand, extend the hand, and Chris Barone rolls over Dylan Huckabone 3-0.